Thank you. How's everyone doing today? Everyone's making their way through. I want to thank everyone for sticking with us, and especially the people who she said came to see me today. I'm very thankful that you're all here. So my research dealt with the effects of mining within streams of the Dubuque area. Mining has been a huge driver for economic prosperity within the over time with many civilizations, and in particular, let me get this hooked up. In particular, in the Dubuque area, the pursuit for galena or lead sulfide was a huge driver of people into this area. And we can hardly talk about the Dubuque area without first talking about the person who this city is named after, and conveniently this hotel. So Julian Dubuque, who I said that, again, this town is named after in the hotel as well, was a French fur trapper who immigrated to the Dubuque area, what is known now as the Dubuque area, in the mid-1700s. He came down with the hopes of expanding his trading posts in fur trapping and trade, but along the way met various members of the Meskwaki Indian tribe, which populated much of the area at this time. The Meskwaki people were doing a very primitive form of mining at this time, essentially taking surface lead and grinding down the lead ore and changing it into things like paint, fish hooks, stuff like that. They were very secretive of their mines. They didn't just tell anyone where they were, but they were fond of Julian Dubuque. They recognized he had a very great ability with business. He was very savvy, very charismatic. And so they knew that, the Meskwaki knew that if they were to be a force in trade with lead sulfide, they would need to have a European at the front of their operations. In 1788, Julian Dubuque wrote a letter to the governor of Spain, who was located in New Orleans at this time, asking to be the basically the sole operator of the mines with the Meskwaki people. The mines of Spain is located just south of Dubuque, just south of us, about 5 miles. From 1788 until 1810, Julian Dubuque was the operator of the mines of Spain with the Meskwaki people helping him along the way to extract this lead. Julian Dubuque married Chief Piazza's daughter, Potosa, so he definitely was liked enough to have done that. And he passed away in 1810 and is currently buried on the bluffs of Dubuque in what is now the mines of Spain. After his death, the whole location was deemed a historic landmark and is now a place for hiking and other recreational activities within Dubuque. After Julian Dubuque's death, this birthed one of the first mineral rushes of people to an area for the sole purpose of mining, the lead rush in the 1820s. It's estimated at this time that there was 4,000 mining permits issued within the city of Dubuque, with as much as 80% of Dubuque's population being just miners alone. So it was a huge influence in bringing people to the area. At this point, there's anywhere between 700 and 2,000 known mine shafts still located within the Dubuque area, so a very relevant thing. This is the Alpine Lead Zinc Mining Company within Dubuque, and this is a sort of, at this time, a contemporary representation of a vertical lead mining shaft that was far beyond what Julian Dubuque or any of the Meskwaki people were doing at the time. The reason that these people came to the area, the reason lead was so popular, lead sulfide was so popular, was due to the ability to smelt it. And this smelting opened up a lot of possibility for other usages, such as lead shot, which is one of the primary components of smelting lead. And this was just around the time of the Civil War, so lead shot was a huge component of rifles and whatnot. So manufacturing that was essential. The shot tower, which is actually just outside this window, if those drapes were up, just along the river, this was a structure essentially made to drop smelting lead from the top of the structure down through the various sieves, and then as it landed in the bottom, it was formed as lead shot. Ooh, skip forward. So we, native people in this area, definitely embrace the history. 15 miles east of us, we have the town named after lead sulfide, Galena, and conveniently a distillery there creating lead mine moonshine, which is just one of the staple pieces of their distillery. So evidence of mining, you don't have to look too far in some cases. Sometimes you just have to look outside your window. These are a few different cases in the 80s and 90s within Dubuque of subsidences from mines that were either not known or known, but just chose to break free one day. And these people had a little bit of a wake-up call. So those were physical examples of mining. Those were, subsidences, things super easy to see, obviously. But what I wanted to look at with my research was more of the invisible element of mining, sort of how lead transports through a system. So particularly my research was started during a winter J-term statistics class at the University of Dubuque, at which we had to analyze a USGS database, which within it had various concentrations of all kinds of metals through all pools of the Mississippi River. And our task was to select a metal and then select a few different pool set that you could compare the metals. I chose, knowing a little bit about the history, I chose lead, and I chose to look at Pool 11 and Pool 12. Pool 12 sits just alongside Dubuque, sits alongside most of the Dubuque area, and Pool 12 is just north of us. This is Lock and Dam 11, right beneath Eagle Point Park. So what we had to do is to see if there was a significant difference between the levels that were present. So again, I chose lead, and between Pool 11 and Pool 12, if you take a look at the figure in the corner, you see that Pool 11 has significantly lower levels of lead than Pool 12 does. So this was the birth of a research project. We wanted to explore a little bit more as to why this could be and how we could sort of dig further into that and check that out. This is a numerical representation of the significant difference. So p-value far less than 0.05. We knew that there was a trend here. We just had to figure out exactly or try to gain a better idea as to how that could be. So to kind of keep pushing along with the geology stuff from the previous speaker, you have to know a little bit about the area to understand why these people came and why the lead is present. Dubuque is at an interesting point at a combination of two different bedrock formations, the Ordovician and the Silurian Age rock. The Silurian Age rock is a slightly newer bedrock formation than the Ordovician, and at one point the whole eastern this whole eastern portion of Iowa was covered with that Silurian Age rock, but as the Mississippi River cut back, it left that Ordovician rock exposed, and that exposure led to the ability for these metals to form via a process called Mississippi Valley type formation. It's a class of hydrothermal deposits that led way into the formation of galena or lead sulfide. Much of this area, like this image right here, within the mines of Spain is covered with limestone. You can see the bluffs everywhere as you drive throughout Dubuque. And one thing that's interesting is the formation of dolomite. So dolomite is very similar to limestone with the acceptance of magnesium. So when magnesium-rich waters came in contact with the limestone, magnesium swapped out with the calcium, forming this dolomite rock structure, which then led to the galena or lead sulfide forming with it as well. So given the mining history that we looked at and the regional geology, we wanted to take a look at this further. So we formed a hypothesis that higher concentrations of lead than Pool 12 of the Mississippi River has been heavily influenced by mining. And we're not saying that this is the areas that we're sampling are the only and leading culprit for this, but it's more of a snapshot or an example of how this could be represented throughout the entire Pool 12 area. So we had to determine our sampling locations. We used a series of geologic maps that were really helpful in aiding choosing our sampling locations. I'd like to point out a few different colors here. The blue is that Silurian Age rock, that slightly newer bedrock formation that sits just south of Dubuque. And that transition into the brownish color is the Maquoketa Shale. And underneath the Maquoketa Shale, we have our formation of galena, which is represented in the pink. And the cream-colored meandering lines is Catfish Creek, which is where much of our sampling occurred, streams that sort of go throughout Dubuque. So keeping the sort of color scheme similar, we determined 5 sampling locations, 3 of which in the Ordovician Age rock, which was where we would expect to find significant concentrations of lead, and 2 in the Silurian age rock, where we would expect to find little to no trace concentrations of lead. So this is an example of stream sampling. So this is, Julian Dubuque's actually buried right there, that image I showed earlier. But this is the mouth of the Catfish Creek into Pool 12 of the Mississippi River. So we'd sample above, below, and then take grab samples as we sort of push upward through the stream. Those samples were bagged and labeled, dried, and then brought to the automated sieve at the University of Dubuque. This is a nice thing to have. If I would have had to handshake these, that would have not been good. But so we had this little apparatus that was able to put the sample in through the top, shake it down to the pan size fraction, and within the pan size fraction, we have our smallest particle size, which is clay. And the significance of that is clay has a negative charge and lead has a positive charge. So we would expect to find the environmentally available metals to be bound with that lead, or with that clay. From there, we took the clay sample into the lab, where I performed a method 350B acid digestion of soil, sediment, and sludges. So at this point, we're using acids to essentially wash the ions, the lead ions, off of the surface of the clay. And no, this isn't a total digestion. It's just a digestion that makes all environmentally available metals. It leaves those behind. So we did use, like I said, really heavy acids during this, so extreme precaution was taken. Definitely used a lot of signs while we were letting stuff cook in the hot block. From there, after the digestion took place, we centrifuged the samples, decanted them, and they were sent to the University of Wisconsin Limnology Laboratory, where they were analyzed via ICP analysis, which told us essentially what was present within the given sample. They sent us, from there, they sent us a spreadsheet, and this isn't worth squinting your eyes and hurting yourself over, but they sent us this huge conglomerate of data with all kinds of metals. So, of course, right away, I scrolled down to lead to take a look at lead levels. From there, I broke them down into the individual streams. So this is the mouth of the Catfish Creek, the South Fork, and then a few of the Silurian age rock streams. So, if you don't have a huge history with levels and stuff like that, it's good to reference what we consider high, what we consider low, what we consider to be a health effect. So this is a table put together by McDonald et al. In 2000. And they found that, they did a whole series of testing on metals, but they found that for lead at 36 parts per million, you would expect to find a possible health effect on the living organism, a possible effect at 36 parts per million. At 128 parts per million is where you would find a probable health effect on the living organism. And obviously that's going to depend on whether you're looking at a young infant or a full-grown male. But those are the levels that we kind of reference as our threshold levels. So again, here are our 5 sampling locations. These are stream averages that were put within them. So you notice the Ordovician age rock samples are certainly above that 36 parts per million. Again, these are averages, and the Silurian age rock is lower than that 36 parts per million. Here's a figure showing that representation. So the blue is Ordovician, blue is the Silurian, and the red is the Ordovician. So this is a graphic showing that that threshold of 36 parts per million. There's far more Ordovician age sampling locations than the Silurian. So one thing we want to do is show the difference in Ordovician and Silurian age rock, which this does a nice job of showing the presence of lead. The other thing we wanted to do is look at an area where there's a known mine. So this is Pulpit Rock in Dubuque, which is right off of Fremont Avenue. And what we did here was we looked at historic mining maps, and we established that there was known mining operations here. When we hiked down here, you could actually see remnants of the entrance to the mine. So we're like, okay, we're in a good area. Let's check it out. We found some pretty cool stuff. The stream average is the middle fork. The stream average of this area is what you would expect to find in an area that has lead present, anywhere between 12 and 20 parts per million. But you notice at, above, and below the mines, we have some pretty significant findings in terms of parts per million, even approaching a probable health effect, which is very interesting for us, and maybe not so much for people in the area. The Right downstream from this is Pulpit Rock. It's a little housing area, so we would tell those people to not let their kids eat mud out of the creek, ideally. And then this is a non-differentiated between sampling locations. This is just a total count showing our concentrations of lead. So certainly quite a few in terms of counts over that 36 parts per million possible effects threshold, and some reaching the 126 to 28 parts per million threshold of a probable effect. So 3 takeaways. Overall lead concentrations were high in the sampled area, so based off that 36 parts per million, we did find quite a few that were over that. Lead concentrations are higher around known and historic lead mining, so looked at a few different mines and found similar results with right beneath them to be significant contributors of lead. And then the lower ore division has significantly higher lead concentrations than the upper Silurian age rock. Acknowledgments. I'd like to thank Joe and Linda Calapity. The Calapities put together a summer fellowship project at the University of Dubuque, which allows for students to do research, undergraduate students to do research, which is really awesome. Dr. Dale Easley, who's out in the crowd, talk to him if you would like. And Dr. Adam Hoffman, which was sort of a tangent of research advisors that helped me a lot over the summer. University of Dubuque, Department of Natural and Applied Sciences, for their use of canoes and other things that helped me along the way. Chris Worley at the University of Wisconsin for running my samples. Jacob Jepson and Ryan Cleary, good friends that helped me in the field. And my girlfriend Hannah for putting up with sediment in the kitchen all summer long. I'd like to end on something that I wasn't really expecting to find. Like Michelle said, I've grown up in this area my entire life. I spent a lot of time out hiking outside with my dog and girlfriend. And one of the things that I learned a lot of was, obviously the history of Dubuque, how mining worked, regional geology, how to be a scientist, trial and error. But one thing I didn't really expect to find was new areas in a town that I've grown up in forever. And this project took me to a lot of these areas where I didn't even know existed. And this is out south of town. There's this large cascading stream with a waterfall that I was pretty amused with. And so that was something that I really enjoyed this entire summer. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Due to the recent ethanol spill or whatever, I was made aware that Dubuque is the public water supply is from groundwater. Do you know if they need to treat for lead in the discharge?
So the levels that we found are far below treatment level, state level remediation. They call it 400 parts per million, which is where you would need to take action if we would find, or if someone would find a site like that. So it isn't treated. It's at a low enough level where you wouldn't expect to find any significance in affecting someone. But yeah, that statewide average is something that you would look for if that would come to be. Thanks.
Other questions? All right, let's give Kyle a hand.
Thank you.